Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how you doing? How's your mama? How's your family? I'm on vacation, visiting some family, but I don't intend on slowing down these videos. We got something new today. New YouTuber by Hopero MMA. Why 2025 has potential to be the UFC's biggest year ever. 2023 was the UFC's biggest year ever until 2024 happened. Now 2024 is the UFC's biggest year until 2025 happens. And I think it's going to be UFC's biggest year as well. So I'm going to let him take it away, and I'm going to react. That's all I can do.
So, fellas, 2024 has been a pretty good year for the UFC. We've seen the rise of Alex Pereira, Ilia Topuria, Dricus du Plessis. We've had one of the greatest moments in MMA history.
In 2023, that screen.
With Max Holloway knocking out Justin Gaethje. We've had a bunch of cool moments throughout the year, a bunch of prospects and contenders break through. But I think 2025 has potential to be one of the UFC's best years in history with what we've got going on. And I'll go through the reasons now. The first reason is because of the super fights that we have. I think 2025 is going to be the year of the super fights. I think we're going to see some massive fights materialize this year. Some fights that we were hoping to see this year that are going to be taking place next year in 2025. For example, Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. Every single MMA fan on the planet wants to see Jon Jones versus...
Can't hear you. Mike can't hear y'all.
We've got going on. And I'll go through the reasons now. The first reason is because of the super fights that we have. I think...
Yeah. She said, hey, Bryce. Yeah, Mike can't hear y'all though, so y'all straight.
2025 is going to be the year of the super fights. I think we're going to see some massive fights materialize this year. Some fights that we were hoping to see this.
You said, hey, Bryce. I said the mics can't hear y'all. I was saying the mic can't hear y'all. So y'all don't have to worry about.
And I'll go through the reasons now. The first reason is because of the super fights that we have. I think 2025 is going to be the year of the super fights. I think we're going to see some massive fights materialize this year. Some fights that we were hoping to see this year that are going to be taking place next year in 2025. For example, Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. Every single MMA fan on the planet wants to see Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. The only people who don't want to see this fight are diehard Jon Jones fans that want him to end on a win. Everybody wants to see this fight. Dana White is hyping up, saying that he's got something big in the works. He's been saying ever since the UFC 309 press conference that this fight is going to happen, and I truly believe that 2025 will be the year that we see Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall. I trust Dana White is going to pay, the big money to Jon Jones. He's going to negotiate properly, and we're going to finally see the fight. One of the biggest, the biggest fight in heavyweight history. I mean, you've got Jon Jones, who most will regard him as the greatest of all time.
Must be
won every single one of his fights. I know there's been a few controversies on there, but he's pretty much beaten every single opponent. The greatest of all time. Had two wins in the heavyweight division for the belt, both by way of finish, beating up a couple guy and a veteran in Stipe, even though Stipe was shouldn't have been anywhere near an octagon. And he's got one more fight. The greatest of all time has one more fight, and that fight happens to be the toughest test of his entire UFC career against Tom Aspinall. The guy with the shortest average fight time in UFC history. The guy who has cleared out the heavyweight division with only a couple neighbours that he hasn't beaten, one of them being Jon Jones, who has slaughtered every single opponent that has been put in front of him in the first or the second round, with the only guy making it to the second round being Arlovski. And he's the interim champion, and both the interim title fights have ended in him knocking out his opponent in the first round. This would be huge. This is one of the biggest fights you can make. Probably the biggest fight you can make in MMA right now. The greatest of all time versus the best heavyweight. This fight, we've been waiting for it for so long. It's just the best versus... This is the definition of the best versus the best. There isn't a single MMA fan on the planet who don't want to see this fight. And I think 2025 will be the year that we finally see it take place. With Dana White talking about the negotiations, with Jon Jones not completely shutting it down, and with Tom Aspinall ready to fight, and he's the interim champion.
Yeah, I think
2025, first half of 2025 as well, Jones versus Aspinall
negotiating that money.
Another potential fight.
Just negotiating that money. This fight's not happening.
Islam Makhachev versus Ilia Topuria. I'd probably say this is the biggest pay-per-view, apart from maybe Jones and Aspinall, on par with that of 2025 as well. This has a lot of potential to it.
Makhachev dealing with Ilia Topuria wasn't going to happen, so I guess it could happen, but it ain't happening.
Obviously going to be taking on Sarukin, but if he can get past Sarukin, which he probably will, and if Topuria can maybe beat another featherweight contender in the meantime, which he probably will as well, he's going to move up to the lightweight division. And I think Makhachev versus Topuria, it's one of the best fights and one of the highest level fights you can make in the sport right now. You've got Makhachev, who is owning the lightweight division. There isn't a single guy at 155 who I'd pick to beat him. Topuria, who's owning the featherweight division. There isn't a single guy at 145 who I'd pick to beat him. 26-1, 16-0. Two guys in the top 5 pound for pound, number 4 versus number 1. Two guys who have the two only guys to beat Volkanovski in the UFC, both by way of knockout. Topuria and Makhachev. One of the most high-level fights you can make in the sport right now. I'd lean towards Makhachev winning this fight, but it's close to being a 50-50 fight in my opinion because of how good they've both done. Both are elite grapplers.
And if Ilia touched that chin, it's night-night. You know what I'm saying? This is a match where I would want Islam to win, and I would lean Islam too. because he evidently has more ways to win. Ilya's not about to go out grapple and submit Islam, but if Ilya touched that chin.
Both elite strikers, both super dangerous, both some of the best in the world. They've both been kind of hyping up a fight as well, with Toria saying that he wants to fight Makhachev, and they've both been going back and forth. Well, not necessarily not back and forth, but they've both been saying things to each other to maybe hype a potential fight. Toria Makhachev, if there's any year that's going to take place, it's going to be 2025. Pantoja moving up to the bantamweight division to face the winner of Merab Nurmagomedov. I've been talking about this a lot recently, but Pantoja's in the flyweight division. It's not boring. I'm not going to say it's boring, but he's just not he's not even competitive. The dude owns the flyweight division, and he is the people's pound for pound top 5. I want to see him move up against Avon Merab, who seems to have bantamweight in a chokehold, beating everyone in the bantamweight division. And if he can beat Umar, he's going to be the best bantamweight in the world. And obviously Umar, the Khabib prototype, 19-0 if he beats Merab, undefeated. If he can beat Merab, that's a huge fight as well. To see Pantoja go up and fight Avon Merab or Umar Nurmagomedov would be another huge fight. So I think Pantoja's got a lot of super fast on the horizon. What about Zhang Li versus Valentina Shevchenko, which I would go out and say is the biggest modern day women MMA fight you can possibly make.
Probably, but
I don't think right now there's a bigger women MMA fight.
Shevchenko's stock has gone down and down and down. After the Alexa Grasso performances, she got to get boring. She got to get smudgy. Shame on Alexa for letting her come out there and do that back to back to you, though. I mean, you knew she was going to shoot. You couldn't defend the takedown. But if you're looking at straight accolades, yeah, Valentina's this and that. But right now, today, she ain't nothing special. I'll be honest with you.
Than Zhang Li versus Valentina Shevchenko.
Yeah, I think she's
between
something special.
The two greatest modern women MMA fighters in MMA right now. I mean, they're both dominating the pound for pound list in women MMA, and they have been for a while. Number 1 versus number 2. There's a lot of controversy over who should be number 1, and the only way to settle it is if they both fight. You've got Zhang Li, who, apart from a very close kind of robbery loss to Rose Namajunas and getting knocked out, has basically been able to get past every single opponent she's been put against, and done it in dominant fashion as well.
Yeah.
Nobody seems to be beating her in the strawweight division. And Valentina Shevchenko, she might have had a few bumps against Alexa Grasso, who she just beat dominantly, and before that she was just completely dominating the flyweight division. They are the two best women MMA fighters in the
Don't
UFC
say dominantly
right now,
as if she
and
beat her
up.
She ain't beat her up. She laid there.
Again, if there's a year that is going to be taking place, 2025 is that year. Also potential for a Conor McGregor return. I know we've been saying this for the past 3 years.
Shit's not happening.
Potentially a return of Conor McGregor. Dricus du Plessis might headline an event in South Africa, which we've been talking about for like a year now. Ilya Topuria might bring the UFC to Spain, which Dana White is looking for. Max Holloway defending the BMF belt back in the 155 division. Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev.
Fire.
The fact that everyone wants to see in the light heavyweight division, apart from apparently recently Poeton, or even Poeton moving up and fighting the winner of John Jones and Tom Aspinall. They can fit that in their 2025 as well. That's another huge super fight for the year. Islam Makhachev versus Sarukian, Holloway versus Oliveira, Dricus versus Chimaev, Sharaputin versus MVP, O'Malley versus Sandhagen, Gaethje versus There's just a bunch of huge fights. I think the first reason why the UFC has a lot of potential in 2025 is because I think this is the year
Dan Hooker's not
where
sharp
the super
at all.
fights are going to materialize. The second reason
Gaethje's much more sharper than Dan Hooker. And yeah, we don't know how Gaethje's looking after the KO. I guess you could say that, but Dan ain't cracking for real.
We're finally going to see the prospects get tested. We've seen a lot of breakthrough prospects in 2024. A lot of prospects come up in the UFC, make a name for himself, and I feel like
Peyton Talbot's getting more babied than Bo Nickel, but it's the fact that Bo Nickel's on main cards is what
kind of all fairly untested. They've not really proven themselves against high-ranked opponents. This is going to be the year where we really see the prospects. So I've got the 10, I'd say, the biggest prospects in the UFC right now, unranked prospects in the UFC right now. And I'm going to go through all of them and why we're all going to see him get tested. I mean, Peyton Talbot in the UFC.
Yeah, that's pretty valid.
Right now. And I'm going to go through all of them and why we're all going to see him get tested. I mean, Peyton Talbot, a big prospect. Probably bantamweight's biggest prospect. Destroyed Cameron Sander, just knocked out Yanis Gamora in 20 seconds. People are saying he's going to be the next O'Malley. He's got a fight booked against Barcelos at UFC 311. And if he beats Barcelos, which he probably will, we're finally going to see him get tested in the most competitive division in the UFC, in the top 20 of the bantamweight division, maybe even in the rankings of the bantamweight division, which I can't wait to see, and I can't wait to see how he does against them. Bo Nickel, Dana White's favourite prospects, gets all the big opportunities.
Dude, that
we're finally going to see him get tested
holy.
Because I'm 99% sure he's going to be getting a ranking fight in his next fight, maybe against Michelle Pereira.
Nah.
But we're going to see how Bo Nickel does against a top opponent after he's recently been saying that he's the best in the world and he'd beat Chimaev and whatnot. Gene Silver, from the Fighting Nerds, a massive prospect, knocks out Charles Jourdain and destroys Drew Dober. He's going to be taking on Melzik in his next fight in a UFC Fight Night event, but
easy money.
I think it's at UFC Saudi Arabia. But either way, I think if he can beat him, Melzik, he's going to be getting a ranking spot in the featherweight division.
Silva, he got to get that weight cut under control. for
Mauricio Hufe, again from the Fighting Nerds, destroyed Jamie Malarkey, just beat James Lonto. Probably 155's biggest prospect. You're probably going to see him against Elvis Brenner or another one of these unranked lightweights next and see how he does against someone that's actually kind of dangerous in the 155 division. Daniel Marcos, 17-0, undefeated, just beat Yanez.
He's okay.
He's probably going to be getting a bantamweight fight.
He's well-rounded. He's
ranked
really
fight his
well-rounded,
next
I can say
fight.
that.
And then you've got Brian Batter, one of the best personalities in the
Give
world.
Marcos. Give Mario Batista. I don't want to see. Give Marcus McGee. That's a good fight. I don't want to see him fight Montel Jackson or Eamon Zahabi or Kyler. I like to see him against the presser. No Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo needs to be fighting Henry Cejudos and stuff like that. You know, he didn't fought enough young people. Mario Batista, that's a good fight. Rob Font.
Ranked fight, he's next. Fight. And then you've got Brian Batter, one of the best personalities in the welterweight division, on an upward trajectory in his career.
He need to get that weight
going
cut
through everybody.
under control too.
He's 99% sure he's going to be fighting in the welterweight.
I don't think he's ready for the rankings in his next
Wonderboy
fight.
Thompson, which is a rumored
That's a winnable
matchup.
fight, though.
You've got Gregory Rodriguez, middleweight's biggest prospect, taking on Jared Cannonier. He's so dangerous as Gregory Rodriguez, so well-rounded.
Yes.
And seeing him against a contender like
Robocop's
Cannonier is
going to
be
him.
obviously where we see him get tested.
Robocop's going to beat Jared Cannonier. Jared Cannonier has been
Zhang
getting tough
Mingyang,
matchup
probably
after tough
light heavyweight's
matchup after
biggest
tough matchup after tough prospect. Jeez.
Prospect. Finished every single one of his wins,
He's
and
such a
all of his
feels like-
knockouts come in the first round. 3-0 in the UFC, all by way of knockout.
not letting him
We're probably
fool
going to
me.
see him fighting the rankings at the light heavyweight division next because of how shallow
I
that
will not
division
allow
is.
myself to be.
Vinicius Oliveira, big bantamweight prospect, burst onto the
Yeah.
scene by knocking out Sapai brutally.
I
Just
wanna know
recently
how long he's
styled
gonna
on
be able
Ricky
to make
Simon.
that
He's going to be
weight.
taking on Said Nurmagomedov next,
such a
and if he
good
can
fight.
beat Said Nurmagomedov,
such
the
a good
rankings are next for
fight.
Vinicius Oliveira, another big prospect.
I don't know if he'll be
Perez
Said, though.
Ziam, been on a 4-fight winning streak, just absolutely
Ziam's a
brutally beat Matt
monster, too.
Favola. You can only imagine that him fighting in the rankings is next from too. So I think all of these unranked prospects, and I've specifically
Yeah.
left it to be unranked.
UFC's gonna
because
look
all of
fun.
the
UFC's
ranked
gonna be
kind of move
fun
from prospect to
next year,
contender. But
boys.
all the prospects in the UFC, the big ones, I think we're finally going to see them get tested. A couple of fraud checks, a couple of new contenders in each division. But either way, this is going to be the year where we see the
Idiot
prospects
Toria,
get
brothers.
tested.
You gotta
And then the third reason.
Has like
This could
4
potentially
fights.
be the greatest year of contender fights
Sorry, yeah,
in the entirety of the
my
UFC,
itch is
or at
so
least
bad.
one of the greatest years. If you look at all the divisions right now, from flyweight to heavyweight, there's so many fun contenders in every single one of the weight classes. I think we're going to see a bunch of massive contender fights. I mean, if you look in the welterweight division, for example, you've got Buckley,
Monsters.
JDM, Leon, Shavkat, but they're going to be fighting each other in 2025. This year, we've seen a bunch of new welterweight contenders, like I said, with the introduction of Shavkat, JDM, and Buckley. Well, this is going to be the year where we see
Leon
these
ain't gonna
contenders
fight the
fight.
new dudes
And that's
no
not even
more.
to
He
mention
gonna
the
wanna
likes
give
of
Kobe a
Carlos
rematch
Cortez
or
and
something.
Michael Morales, who are up and coming as well.
For real.
We're going to see a bunch of these new breed of welterweights take each other on, rather than just the same guys like Covington, Usman, Masvidal, you know, the same ones that have been
We're
taking each other
considering
on for
Leon
the past
the new
couple of years.
breed?
We've got a new set of welterweights.
I know
and
he's
think
younger than the
2025 is
older-
the year where
than
we
the
see these
Usmans and
contenders
stuff,
fight
but
each
we're
other, because
considering a new breed.
most of them haven't even fought yet. Lightweight division, you've got Charles Oliveira, Max Holloway, Rafael Fiziev, and Dan Hooker in the
Get
same
Dan
weight
Hooker
class at the
off
same
that
time, ready
picture.
to fight.
Y'all
There's so
overhyping the 2020 Dan Hooker that fought Dustin Poirier is better than the Dan Hooker today. Dan Hooker is literally declining. The only thing that hasn't declined is that toughness. He's still tough. His hands ain't as sharp. His hands ain't as fast. He barely using his kicks anymore. He's slow. Like, come on, man. He's
How many
not
dream
competing
fights
with
you can
that.
make? Imagine like a Fiziev versus a
With
Holloway.
that top
or
five, that's not
Oliveira
happening.
versus Holloway, or even like
Y'all
a
gotta
Dan
chill out
Hooker
with
versus
that.
Oliveira. The contenders that we've got now at 155, I think, is better
Dan
than it's
Hooker
been in a
gets
while.
subbed
Especially with,
within,
like I
like,
said, the
a
return
round
of
or
Rafael
two.
Fiziev. And that's not even to mention up-and-comers like Paddy Pimblett, like Kanato Maikano, Yoel Alvarez as well, who are on the come-up as well,
Yoel
potentially make
Alvarez.
themselves into a contender. And not even the three horsemen of scraps, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje. Now,
Doesn't
fair
feel
enough,
right to
their
have
time might be
Michael Chandler
limited,
right
but we're
there.
probably going to see them have like one
Dude
last
has
scrap
one
in
UFC
2025
win.
as well. And it is the
Not
home of
counting
the best fighter in the UFC. What about
Tony
the middleweight
Ferguson.
division too? You've got Imavov, you've got Caio Bravo, Adesanya, Hamzat Chimaev, Robert Whittaker. A bunch of new contenders have now broken up in the middleweight division. We're not seeing the likes of Cannonier and Vettori dominating the top of the division now. We've got some new names in. Like I said, we're going to be seeing Adesanya versus Imavov, which is a big fight. We've already seen Chimaev and Whittaker, but the point is, there's new contenders. The banter, and even in the middleweight division too.
Dude, look at
But
Brawler.
the point is, there's
Dude
new contenders.
looks
The banter, and even in the
crazy.
middleweight division too. The likes of Anthony Hernandez on the come up, Sharpton
Get
Magomedov,
Shara
Brendan
and
Allen in the
Brendan.
bantamweight division, Sean O'Malley, Corey Sandhagen, Peter Yan, Figueiredo. Mix and match these guys against each other. I know a few of them have fought each other already, but there's so many fun fights that can be made. The point I'm trying to make is I think the contenders
need Sean
that we've now
O'Malley,
got in
Peter
every
Yan
weight
too,
class, we've
5
kind of got a
rounds.
fresh set of contenders in each weight class that we didn't really have previously for the past couple of years. We've finally broken out of that stale era of every weight class, and I think 2025 is going to be the year where we see a bunch of these contender fights and we see these contenders take each other on, and it's just going to make for some great fights. And then the fourth reason is cards are finally starting to become stacked again in the UFC. If you look at the first 4 cards of 2025, apart from Dern versus Ribas, every single one of the first 3 cards, at least, are stacked.
All right, bro, we got Izzy on a fight night. Yeah, it's in Saudi, so they paying for it.
It's the most stacked card since UFC 300.
Izzy's fighting for free.
I don't think they could have done it in better
Izzy's
fashion.
fighting
It's such
for
a
free.
stacked
Think
card.
about that. Izzy's fighting for free.
You've got Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan. Makhachev's toughest test at 155. Massive fight for the lightweight division. The best versus the best in the lightweight division. You've got another title fight between Merab and Umanamagomedov. Merab, who seems to be unbeatable in the bantamweight division, against the toughest test in Umanamagomedov, who's undefeated. They've got a rivalry going on as well. That's another huge title fight. Yuri versus Hill, 2 former champions. Alex Pereira victims taking each other.
I want Prohaska to run through Hill, but dude, can you not just see Jamal Hill knocking out Yuri Prohaska?
I've kind of been waiting for this matchup ever since they were both a champion, and now we're finally getting to see it. UFC 311, that's a big fight too, probably going to end in a finish. The return of Dariush against Tanato Marcano, who seems to be tearing up the lightweight division. Kevin Holland, the best journeyman in the UFC.
Kevin's probably cooked.
Who's a double champion in 1FC. Came over to the UFC, got a finish, and now he's taking on Kevin Holland. You've got Johnny Walker taking on probably one of the light heavyweight's biggest prospect, Bogdan Guskov. Jelton Almeida versus Sergey Spivak. Stylistically should actually be quite a fun grappling matchup. Probably going to be Jelton Almeida going out there and making a name for himself and making him into a legitimate contender in the heavyweight division. And we've got Peyton Talbot, like I said before, taking on Barcelos. So we're going to finally see Peyton Talbot compete again. Grant Dawson versus Diego Ferreira, a huge fight between 2 lightweight prospects. The point I'm trying to make is this card is stacked from top to bottom. I think it's one of the most stacked cards in the UFC since UFC 300. And to kick off the pay-per-view, kick off the year with this, is an insane stacked card. And then after that, we've got UFC Imavov versus Adesanya, UFC Saudi Arabia. One of the most stacked fight nights. I mean, having Adesanya in a fight night main event just says everything about the card. Against Imavov, an up-and-coming contender. Imavov's been on a roll as well. I'm obviously going to be picking Izzy in this fight, but Imavov's been on a roll, taking out everyone apart from Strickland. You've got Sharuputi Magomedov versus Michael Venom Page. This is one of the best striking matchups you could have made in the UFC. Two of the most crafty strikers in the UFC. You've put them against each other in this fight, and sometimes you have a fight between 2 strikers and it ends up being a bit of a chess match, a bit of a boring fight. I can 99% guarantee this ain't going to be that fight. These guys ain't going to be having a chess match. They're going to be out there and having a scrap on the feet, and I can't wait for it. Pavlovich, one of the most dangerous heavyweights in the world, returning against
B-boy gonna keep it safe, though. He gonna want to say safe.
Just going to be another Pavlovich highlight reel.
I don't know what's going on. Sergey gonna be able to impose his will more. That longer reach, being longer. I think he's bigger.
Rosenstrike 2-0 in the heavyweight.
Rosenstrike gonna try to keep it safe though.
Looked pretty good doing so. Solid kickboxer. I think that's going to be a really good fight in the heavyweight division. And that's even to mention the return of Ikram Aliskerov against Andre Muniz. Like I said before, Vinicius Oliveira versus Said Magomedov. Shamil Gaziev versus a guy who's coming off a win in Thomas Peterson. This is a really stacked card too. And then after that, we've got UFC 312. And even though there's not really been that much fights announced for UFC 312, I mean, Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis, probably one of the best build-ups we're going to see for a title fight. And it was a scrap the first time around, even though there's a lot of controversy over Strickland getting the title shot. It's going to be a good fight. You've got Welly versus Suarez. Welly's toughest fight in the strawweight division. And then look at the fight nights as well. UFC Seattle, Curtis Blades versus Rizvan Kruniev. Rizvan Kruniev, should he be getting a fight against top 5 Curtis Blades without a single fight in the UFC? No. But he did beat the guy, I forgot his name, the guy who won Ngannou just beat in PFL. Fuck, what's his name again? Henan Fajeda. He just beat Henan Fajeda, did Rizvan Kruniev. Now he's coming over to the UFC to take on one of the top contenders. Probably going to be a Curtis Blades Frochek and a Dagestani, but it's still a good fight. Brendan Allen versus Anthony Hernandez. Another massive fight.
Brendan's cooked.
This is just such a good grappling matchup. Hernandez, I'd say, is probably my favourite middleweight prospect. He just mauls Michel Pereira. He just absolutely mauls people with his grappling. And I was saying the same thing about Brendan Allen. He took a loss to Imavov, but again, from a stylistic standpoint, such a good grappling fight. Like I said before, Gene Silver taking on Melzik. We've got Edson Barboza versus Steve Garcia. I'm pretty sure Steve Garcia is won his last 5 fights, all by way of knockout. And now he's going to be taking on Edson Barboza, who historically is an amazing kickboxer. And then UFC London, Leon Edwards,
35 minutes, that's all.
Champion coming back and fighting in a fight night main event in the UK. Also on that card is rumoured to be Paddy Pimblett versus Benoit Saint-Denis, which for a fight night as well as Leon being a headliner, is huge. That's a massive fight. England versus France. We've got Jan Blachowicz returning, a former champion, against Carlos Ulberg, the biggest prospect in light heavyweight. Everyone's favourite heavyweight, your favourite fighter's favourite fighter, Mick Parkin, taking on Marcin Tybura for his biggest test yet. So I think the cards are finally starting to become stacked again.
BSD and Paddy's
and I
so
think it's
interesting.
just going to be a massive year for
Such an
2025 when it comes to stacked cards. We're finally going to be getting out of the Apex as well and moving to more named locations. And then my fifth and final reason, it's a bit of a short reason, but I think the MMA fights outside the UFC are going to be big, and the MMA fighters outside the UFC have a lot of potential as well. I mean, Francis Ngannou,
so you're going to stop right there. We're talking about
the biggest MMA fighter outside the UFC, but for literally...
But we're going to stop right there. We're talking about the UFC. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to somebody if you enjoyed. What you looking forward to most in 2025? Yeah. Share this. You on vacation? It ain't stopping, though. Like, comment, subscribe. You ain't got home, but you got to get up out of here, man.